Hello and welcome. I'm Dre.
I'm John.
This is Voices in the Dark, where we're always learning how to human.
I wonder if we should nuance that a bit and say where we are learning how to human.
Okay.
Always, I don't know. It's not quite rolling off the tongue for me yet. So suggestions. No. It's like it works on its own, learning how to human.
Yes.
And then it can end up sounding more like an American commercial. Like, we're always learning how to human, busting through the boundaries.
Okay. We'll have to rethink that maybe.
Where we're always doing your mum, and where we are always looking at modern Stoicism. This is the Modern Stoic, episode number 13, if I am not mistaken. And we're going to be pinging our microphone stands.
Apologies about that. Hopefully it wasn't too loud.
And we're going to talk about Seneca's letter called On Festivals and Fasting. This one's all about intentionally doing tough things in order to be sturdier for when tough things happen out with our decision making, training the mind and body for life and for the unknown. This is one of Tim Ferriss's favorites, which is probably because it can actually be practiced. There's some practical application, like an exercise that we can do from it. And it's about learning that the how is often more important than the what in the things that we do. And that going with less means that we appreciate more when we have it. Plus, at the end, a bit I quite like, how to understand your anger and not be consumed by it. So quite a lot.
There's quite a lot of information in there.
Yeah, but it's not a super lengthy letter. I think it's just one of the meatier ones, not like the one we did a while ago where it was just like, and another thing, and this, and that, blah, blah, blah.
There's been a few where he's scatterbrained, where this one's kind of very on message the whole way through, really.
So to update everybody, we're now videoing, which we experimented a bit with in the past, but now with like cinema grade photography or filmography going on, so you can go to our YouTube channel. Is that also at V in the D?
I think that one's Voices in the Dark, but I'll have to double check.
You have to search for Voices in the Dark, and we'll put the link in the episode notes on voicesinthedark.world anyway. And you can see us in our glory, and I'll try and remember not to like do anything visibly disgusting whilst we're recording.
See our beautiful faces, check out whether or not, sometimes we might be shirtless, who knows?
Yeah, I'm actually not shirtless. I'm wearing a Rave Nectar t-shirt, which is a very psychedelic brand. I know the founder of the company, really cool guy, and I love their attitude, which is to be as in-your-face and garish as possible. It's
really trippy. I feel like I'm having a psychedelic trip when I look at it.
Yeah, so you can have that too for free. Come and check out the video. We also got a Christmas tree behind us because we're recording ahead of, batching.
One day too long. I've been told that the 8th of January is the latest you could possibly keep it up. Although this has been released afterwards, I could have pretended and lied.
You could. You fucked up. You fucked up.
Messed it up.
So briefly, if you enjoy the show, you value what we're doing, you can help us out a lot and make us smile if you can give us a 5-star rating and review on iTunes. Makes a big difference, especially when we're trying to book cool guests and get them involved. That's what they go and look at. Come and join us and talk to us over on the socials, facebook.com/V in the D. We're now on Instagram, trying to big that up and post some like daily updates and stories and things. That is at vinthed.pod. And we will kill the person who got at V in the D once we have identified them.
There can be only one. We will behead you Highlander style.
I want to rewatch that, and I showed Jamie the trailer for it the other day, and I forgot just how insanely 80s cheese it is.
Especially the trailer. You could recut the trailer to be more modern if you wanted, but you can see the difference in trailer styles from the 80s to the 90s. It's remarkable if you go back and see old movies.
I mean, it was powerful, but also hard to take in any way seriously.
They made quite a few of those. 3 or 4?
They did, and then there was
cheesier and weirder.
There were series. There's Sean Connery in pretending to be Spanish, even though Sean Connery only has one accent. Not just
Spanish. I think Spanish, but really originally ancient Egyptian or something weird like that.
I need to rewatch all this shit. Anyway, Highlander aside, if you can help us out even more directly and help us like pay off the credit cards for things like a beautiful camera as we try and increase the quality of what we give to you. If you go over to patreon.com/V in the D, join the wonderful people there who are supporting us directly. You can say, I just want to give $1 a month, and it's all automated, cancel anytime. You can give as much as you want per month, and there's various reward tiers. In fact, no one's yet gone for the top one, which involves actually going to a personal private whiskey tasting.
Yeah, we'll take you out to a whiskey tasting.
Which I'm definitely up for. I want someone to get that happening.
We're going to do it anyway, so you can either be with us or be against us.
Against us, we cut you down and kill you. So that would be pretty fun if you want to get involved in that. I'm sure I had something hilarious to round that up with, but it's gone. So better talk about Seneca.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. This is entitled On Festivals and Fasting, and Seneca was apparently writing in December, which for us is also just gone. He's talking about it's a festival time, the Saturnalia.
Yep.
And he kind of he likes how others complain about it. He complains about it too. He's in kind of two minds. At first, he says it now seems like the whole year is some sort of festival, that it used to be a day, now it's a month, now it's the whole year.
Which is interesting, because what was happening to the Roman Empire while Seneca was alive is probably what's happening to Western society right now. We are slowly morphing into always, or at least trying to make you think you should always go on holiday or always, take time off in some way, whilst also telling you that you shouldn't. But it's the same kind of approach to distracting you from real life, because real life is increasingly mundane or shit, depending at what level of society you're at.
On the shitometer.
Mundane for the rich and super shit for the poor. So it's that point of empire decadence that we might be at. We might be seeing the beginning of the collapse of Western society. Who knows?
Well, it's a pleasant way
to start the podcast. But
it's a good point. But it's worth saying, like, back in university days when I actually studied the fall of Rome, much more these days people are interpreting that period as one of transformation. It looks like, something ended. At least in the Western Empire, there was still the Byzantine Empire, the Eastern Roman Emperor for much longer. But it was a change more than just a destruction. It's not like suddenly there were dark ages, which is what people claimed for a long time. Instead, the church, which had already become deeply entwined with the state, became like the main center of authority and organization and so forth across the different lands of the former Western Roman Empire.
Yeah, so I mean, it's not as bad as some historians would make it out to be, but at the same time, aqueduct, like running water, was no longer a thing.
Yeah, there are
literacy
problems.
went down, road building stopped.
But it's not like, I think when we think of the fall of the Roman Empire, our minds sort of go into tunnel vision and think of Rome being destroyed and in flames and it's all gone. But that's not what the Roman Empire was. It's an enormous kind of semi-federated collection of different places bound together by common ideals.
Yeah, funny enough, I think in Britain in particular, it sort of went on without the rest of it for a little bit longer because it was isolated. They were trying to still sort of be Roman for a bit.
Let's be Roman, chap.
Before all the sort of various other tribes sort of started conquering each other and creating little kingdoms.
So my thought here is that if we are entering the decadent phase of Western civilization and a fall, well, it could be a potentially painful birth into something else and something better. Maybe when we've talked about universal basic income and so forth, there has to be a break of a current system potentially to get there. I'm
sure it'll be wonderful in 500 years.
Good.
It's whether or not we're going to have a good time.
Well, let's see if we can find ways to be stoic about the coming end of the world. So Seneca debates whether or not we ought to dive into the festivities when they're happening in excess.
My vote is yes.
Yes, you dive in all the time, every day.
Well, the ritualistic festivities, they should be sort of compartmentalized, but I think they do serve a good purpose, especially the end of year stuff. And funnily enough, Saturnalia got co-opted into becoming Christmas.
Yeah.
So the original supposed birth of Jesus was definitely not on 24th of December. It was somewhere in the middle of the year somewhere. But to try and maintain some semblance of the pagan rituals, they moved it to the biggest festival, and which also coincided with the death the birth of a different Messiah, Mithras.
Oh yeah, the cult of Mithras.
So they kind of try to combine as many pre-existing pagan traditions and rituals to say, look, all you have to do is change the name, but you can keep doing the things you like.
That's what the Soviet Union did as well, in many ways. Like they experimented with creating their own holidays, which were separate, and then realized people were still just celebrating the old ones and the new ones, because everyone likes a day off work, and then they would continue taking a day off on the old holidays. So if you try and combine the festive spirit together with something else, that can help. Everyone likes a party. But rituals are really important, because I've been reading a bunch of Joseph Campbell recently, and he talks about how rituals are the mythology of a given society and person being actualized. It's like moments where we state to ourselves and perform to ourselves who we are and why we are what we are. So that can be like the ritual of coming of age that we largely don't have in most Western societies now, and a lot of people, and me included, would say that's a loss. An important stage of life transition where something is recognized beyond just saying, happy birthday, but what does this signify? You've signified coming out of childhood into a new stage of life, and to dramatize that helps make it real and meaningful, rather than, this is a card, I don't feel any different. What does this mean? Not a lot in that case. Like, for a lot of, we could talk about marriage, I guess, which is not my favorite ritual by any means, but that's one that does continue, where you go, well, the ceremony we can see is important because it's a performance of the things that are being declared. Because we could just leave it all implicit, but then it doesn't seem to really mean as much to it as we like to mark it and observe it and perform it.
But also, I mean, people like to poo-poo the concept that life is short, saying it's literally the longest thing you'll ever experience. Oh, well,
I haven't seen my dick.
But, fuck you, man. It's not that long, especially the good part. If you don't do it right, the good part isn't that long, because you're only young for a little bit. If you don't have the right framework or mindset or the right resources or a combination thereof, you might only have a decade or two of happiness before responsibilities hit you, depending on what level of society you're at. But it is a brief time to live it ascetically and with parsimony and restraint, and why? Yeah. For what possible reason? So you can go to your deathbed at age 100 and go, I did not live to excess. Well done you.
Lived a virtuous life. But it's not an enjoyable thing to live that sort of so-called virtuous life. Again, some part of the Joseph Campbell books that I've been reading, he was remembering he'd read a story, and then he said, I actually saw this happen in real life, where he overheard at a pub or cafe or something a family, and there's a father and son talking, and the son says he wants to go do something different with his life, and the father says, if I've never done anything that I wanted to with my life. And he didn't say that as a sign of oh, what a shame I never got to. He was like, I never got to do that, and that's the way things are. So you better learn, because that's how life works. I've never got to do a single thing that I wanted to in my life, and you better learn that. What a horrendous tragedy, day by day, that some people are facing that.
Yeah, and I think it's another method of control. Especially effective in modern religions of the Semitic branches, the whole sin and try to don't live to excess. It's a method for which, by the way, the rich never observe. It's a method to control you and to keep you from being a poor worker. Because to be honest, if you have a shitty working condition because the higher ups are milking you for all you're worth, you're going to want to live to excess more often than you probably should, which means then you'll not be effective as a worker.
Yeah, and then part of the trick of having momentary celebrations is arguably to keep the poor in check. You give them bread and circuses, the phrase is.
Very compartmentalized to specific moments.
Yeah, and then everyone gets their latent anger out and shows, oh, we don't take these hierarchies seriously, really. Ha, 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 let's have a carnival, but back to work tomorrow.
Yeah.
So Seneca says, Did you want to
No,
add
go
something?
on.
Okay, so Seneca says, he debates, should I dive into this, should I not? And he says, it shows much more courage to remain dry and sober when the mob is drunk and vomiting, but it shows greater self-control to refuse to withdraw oneself and to do what the crowd does, but in a different way. Thus, neither making oneself conspicuous nor becoming one of the crowd, for one may keep holiday without extravagance.
Yeah.
So what he's saying is, okay, you could say I'm super virtuous and I'm not going to get drunk and engage, but he says far more demonstrative of self-control and self-awareness is do partake, but consciously. Don't just go and do it for no reason because you don't know why. Don't go and do it just to be part of the crowd, but go and do it for your own reasons.
I like to think of it as, I mean, if you think of it as, trying to think of a good visual metaphor. Let's turn it to F1.
Okay.
or car racing. So normal day-to-day life, you're going slowly around the track, so that you can take the corners quite slowly and safely. Excess is when you're going as fast as you possibly can whilst going around. Mm-hmm. I think the goal here is to not go so fast that you wipe out of the corners. That's excess to excess. Mm-hmm. If you destroy your life or, damage your health to an extent that, it wasn't just a way to let go, but it becomes a damaging or addictive sort of self-punishing behavior.
Mm. And also you got to worry about the life of your tires in this metaphor. Like, you can't do as fast as possible qualifying style laps every single lap. You got to pull them out when you need them or when you want them. But the rest of the time you're trying to have a good pace. A bit of, I want F1 now. I want to watch my F1.
I thought you'd like that.
Yeah, I did. I appreciated it. So the point here that I think is important is how and why you do something changes the meaning of what it is more profoundly than we tend to think when we think automatically. To drink to enjoy time with your friends is different than to drink for the purpose of getting drunk. To go on a walk, as another example, could mean all sorts of different things. You could do it in anger and despair, but you might also do it in perfect harmony, in a kind of gentle appreciation of life. It's not the act itself, like joining in the carnival, it's the meaning of it, the why.
Indeed. And I think he touches upon a concept that is very important to me, which is, I hate all those 12-step programs or those types of things where you're like, oh, I'm clearly incapable of having just one drink, so I'm not going to have any drinks at all. Like where's the self-discipline in that? You're still letting alcohol control your life. It's just a different way.
That's a good point.
And sure, maybe doing it that way leads to a point where, you sort of do better than if you did sort of let yourself get drunk into, a stupor every day. But at the same time, you've let it defeat you a different way.
So true self-control, like Seneca is saying, is where you know that you have a problematic relationship or you have had with alcohol, but you have the extra discipline to be able to have one drink.
Yeah. And a lot of those programs start by making you accept that you're not in control and surrendering to a higher power of some sort, so that you don't blame yourself for being unable to being Seneca-like at it. So rather than saying, look, clearly you're having difficulty with this, but it's okay. Let's try no alcohol for a while. It's okay that you can't control yourself, so therefore become a teetotaler.
I hadn't thought about it that way. It's interesting. I wonder if we've got our audience exclusively alcoholics who are now very angry with us.
Well, statistics also show that it has the lowest possible success rate of any type of system or program to stop addiction. There's numbers to back it up. People that follow those programs nearly always fall back into their addiction.
Oh, we need to get Russell Brand on the show because he's all into the 12-step thing. That's what his new book is about, how you can apply the Alcoholics Anonymous kind of plan to the whole of your life and its addictive behaviors.
But that's the thing. He's addicted to addiction in a way. He just keeps shifting what that means to him. From drugs to sex, and then probably to sort of spiritual enlightenment. It's still an addiction. He's moving his obsessive behavior to one thing or another. And also, we know pretty well that he occasionally strays as far as sex is concerned.
Do we? Is that what you spend your time reading?
No, I've seen a few sort of times, being talked about that sort of thing. I think drugs and alcohol he hasn't touched, but he still indulges in other things.
Russell, I know you're listening. You want to come on the show and set the record straight?
Happy to debate about it.
It would be an interesting conversation.
I'd love to be convinced otherwise.
I like him more than I used to when I first, maybe, a decade ago or something. saw some of, I don't know, him on TV in one form or another, I was like, okay, so you're using a lot of complex words to say nothing at all. But in more recent times when I've heard him speak, I'm like, you're talking about some good stuff here.
And don't get me wrong, nothing wrong with finding a system that works for you. But what I do object to is fetishizing or exalting it to more than what it is, which is you couldn't hack it, therefore here's plan B.
And that's what it is. So to round up the point that the how matters more than the why is something Philip McKernan talked about in our interview with him, that having discovered what your gift or journey or focus, your reason is, what you then need to turn to is, how am I doing it? Because that defines the outcome. And I thought of this as well about work I did about people laughing under dictatorship, that they told jokes, but it didn't really change their situation, but it changed how they got to a state of acceptance. They could just go, I can't do anything, I have to accept it. Or you tell a joke and it kind of, it's like taking the scenic route to the same destination, that by the time you get there, you've had a laugh, you may still be resigned to it, you're not changing anything directly, but you change how you feel about it. And that's kind of the core of Stoicism, you're changing how you feel.
Very, very important. And the whole, sorry, I need to make a point of the whole why thing. Like, it's become fashionable, thanks to Simon Sinek. Sinek or Sinek?
Sinek.
To talk about the why, which is important for marketers. But I'm going to clarify. It's important to focus on the why for marketers because it sells more. But the reason why it sells more is because we're mentally ill. The why is almost irrelevant in all cases. It's a human condition of wanting to obsess over it. But the how and the what are often way more important, or tell you a lot more about what you're going to do. You can sell a computer with the why, saying, we're doing this because we think different, and this is for all you artists out there. And you go, wow, that's me, and you buy it. But ultimately, you're not going to keep it if it's a shitty computer. You're going to go, well, they couldn't back up what they were saying, and the substance is so much more important than the reason behind it. It's just that we're motivated by reason. So marketers and publicists and everything should use the why to target you, to basically to con you. They're manipulating you with the why. To
get you in the shop door.
But to think that your mission is to find your why, or like to sort of obsess over your or other people's whys, is, I think, not what you should do.
You're dropping the bombs today. I don't know what's coming next. So the key part of this letter that Tim Ferriss likes is about the training of your mind and soul to be able to have the discipline to take part in a certain restrained way through your choosing. So here's the quote with the kind of exercise from Seneca. Set aside a certain number of days during which you shall be content with the scantiest and cheapest fare, with coarse and rough dress, saying to yourself all the while, is this the condition that I feared? It is precisely in times of immunity from care that the soul should toughen itself beforehand for occasions of greater stress, and it is while fortune is kind that it should fortify itself against her violence.
So, rather than going out to sleep on the streets, I would recommend going out not glamping, by the way, because that doesn't work. Proper camping or trail walking, where there's like little huts along a walk that maybe takes 2 weeks to go through. And, you just have to eat out of tin cans over a fire and sleep on hard floors using a sleeping bag. And it also helped, it's a double whammy because you're also reconnecting with nature and spending time walking outside. For me, that would be the best way to do this. Yeah,
he incites Lucilius that he should do it properly, and real poverty, shitty food, wooden pallet, all of that kind of thing. And he says that even when angry, fortune grants enough for our needs. Taking back to a previous episode where there's a distinction between needs and wants, and needs are very basic in terms of shelter and food and water, and friendship, I think, falls into that category too. Even for the autiste. So I was thinking about, I think it's very refreshing when you realize that you can actually be fine with very little. It's not enjoyable if it's forced on you, but what Seneca is saying is it will be much less of a shock, and you won't fear the possibility so much if you willingly go and try it out and remind yourself, oh, look, me and my 2 hands and 2 feet, we can do okay. I don't necessarily need the maidservant and the limousine and everything else to be happy, or to at least be content in existing.
Yeah. This type of philosophy is funny in a way to me because it's, it's something that basically it's a first world problem, right? That you're so privileged that you're afraid of not being privileged, and you have to put yourself in conditions that people experience daily, so they know that's not that bad. Well, intentionally.
Yeah, I think that in one way it is. In another way, this is another ancient human practice of reconnecting with your inner self, your inner strength, your spiritual self, which is connected with things like a vision quest, where you go and discover like what your future's going to be, which involves isolation, eating very little, and just being you, the world, nature, no comfort.
It's a recalibration. I think of it as a method of training yourself for basically fortitude. Mm-hmm. The same way, if you don't run around ever, maybe doing a 15-degree incline on the treadmill will get your heart rate to 140. Not that it happened to anyone here.
No, that didn't happen to anyone
after like a few months off training. But if you go and do sprints, if you go and do marathons and you train yourself, then when you suddenly have to run for the bus or run from a bear or something, it's not going to be so bad. It's the same kind of concept. If you don't train your mind the way that you train your body, it will get soft, and you might need it someday. You might be in a situation where you're homeless. It could happen, and it's going to be so much shittier if you haven't already prepared yourself for it.
I remember when we interviewed Jamie Alderton, aka Grenade J, back in the day, personal fitness trainer, and how else to describe him? He's a social media mastermind.
Yeah.
He talked about, because he's been in the army, he's been in conflict zones, that for him, a lot of everyday life just really can't be as stressful as those things he's experienced. He's recalibrated his spectrum in that effect. I was thinking in terms of, because this is also about feasting and so on, I don't think we've released this episode yet for reasons I forget, but we talked when I was doing what turned into, I think, a 65-hour fast, where something was up with my stomach. The doctors were as useless as I expected, and your advice, God knows I follow your advice some of the time, was, okay, there's probably some shitty bacteria in your gut, so starve it. And so you gave me a really plain diet, and you said, but fasting would be best. So then that edge in me that comes out going, okay, let's max out. And then step by step, I was like, I won't have the next meal. It's pretty trippy. But it reminded me of, get ready to drink, everyone, that one time in the monastery where we did a fast that we were allowed 1 meal a day. So it wasn't like total fasting, but it was, I think, 9 days, 1 meal a day.
Okay.
Pretty interesting experience. It reminded me of how a relationship with food is very determined by kind of habit and pattern and expectation. Once I knew and had decided I wasn't going to be eating anything, I didn't experience hunger in the same way that I usually do at all. Some days, like today even, I'm like, oh my God, I need to eat or I'm going to die kind of intensity. I've got to get some food. I'm getting angry. I'm getting difficult. And yet I also know I could last 3 days and more potentially without eating anything.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting perspective switch that alerts you to the fact that hunger is significantly generated or experienced in the mind. It's not that the body is totally freaking out and pulling the alarm cord.
There's 2 hungers, as far as I'm concerned. There's the one that you feel like every day. You're like, oh, I need a snack. I need my sandwich. I need to eat my lunch. That one's all in your mind. Real hunger I experienced when I did my bodybuilding diets, and I was in caloric restriction or eliminating entire food groups, like sometimes no carbs, sometimes no fats, to achieve fast fat loss in a short period of time whilst maintaining muscle mass. And at some point, the psychological hunger switched off, and then a little bit later, the real hunger activated. the hunt, you're starving. Danger, danger, danger. That was a very, very different emotion and feeling. It was so much more primal and so much more harder to resist. Very, very different concept. And everybody thinks they're hungry. You're not hungry.
You haven't known hunger.
No, you're not hungry. And that was with a diet. Not eating is way worse. When you get to that point, you'll switch off probably about 3 or 4 days. Like your body just goes, well, I'm not getting hungry. Like I'm not getting food, so I'll stop hounding him about it. On the higher level of psychology.
Yeah.
And then at some point, the trigger mechanisms of your reptilian brain go, you must eat. Those switch on and something else activates.
I don't think I got there, though I did get to, actually, I went for a little walk and it was freezing cold and my body just kind of freaked out. It was like I felt the cold so deeply. I felt terribly weak and was just like, okay, I think I've got a problem now.
Yeah.
So that it's really hard to keep that in perspective, but I think maybe doing it regularly or just have a day fast now and then, I really ought to introduce into my routine just to remind myself. And it's very good for the immune system, as we know, and also as part of how we evolved as humans. There was not much likelihood of having 3 square meals a day.
Yeah, our biology is designed for sporadic, like, overeating and like extreme fasting. Really, like, well, to some degree, or at the very least, irregular food sources. Certainly not having the same type of food source necessarily for the same type of time. So there's a particular fruit that comes into ripeness, and for about a week that's what you're eating.
Nom nom nom.
Maybe with a few grubs to supplement, and then that one stops because you've eaten every fruit in your particular tribe's area.
Yeah.
And but the nuts come on board, and suddenly you switch from having high fructose, I don't know, like bananas, to zero carb, eating purely of fats of nuts. The body of most animals, of omnivores at least, is designed for just eat whatever you can get when you can get it. Whereas carnivores and herbivores are a bit different. Obviously, they get the same supply of food all the time, but they also have to bear in mind things like winter or not being able to hunt or those kinds of things. So they also have a period of fasting or not fasting built into their systems.
Om nom nom. A smaller couple of examples about kind of the training wheels of this can just be if you observe something like, so I was on a trip in Morocco recently, which was interesting, and even though I'm used to living out of a bag, took the bag with me, and did I use most of the clothes I took? Did I fuck? Even with, pretty few overall. And like, oh, I didn't need this because I was thrown out of my ordinary context and realized as a consequence a lot of stuff is superfluous. Or a story I like from Chris Ryan of the Tangentially Speaking podcast, the author of Sex at Dawn. At one point, not for the first time or the last time, I think he had his bag stolen when he was traveling in India. He was on a train and they removed a bunch of stuff from it. And this was quite early in his days wandering the world. And it was kind of a blessing because he brought all of this extraneous stuff with him, all this like complex camping gear and heavy duty, like it brought like I can't remember the details now, but he definitely brought like excessive things like a stove, whatever, stuff that he didn't need. It was taken. And then he did the rest of his trip with a smaller, lighter bag and was much happier for it. And I guess someone else benefited in some way. But little moments like that, it's useful if we can try and design them rather than waiting to be robbed, to try it out. Seneca says, and when we have these little confrontations, then we can enjoy what we do have all the more. He says, let us become intimate with poverty so that fortune may not catch us off our guard. We shall be rich with all the more comfort if we once learn how far poverty is from being a burden. So he's kind of saying there's no need to overly congratulate ourselves about this at all, except to appreciate that when it's done freely and we don't have to do it, that's a bonus. Like fortune might just kick you in the balls some other time as well. So it's kind of probably a sense of control that's also positive for us here. Like I have chosen to do this.
And
Deep
just
sigh.
conditioning. Conditioning. Everything that is a biological system is based on sine wave input. So there is a maximum negative input, a maximum positive input, and your body tries to equalize to the zero in the middle somewhere. Your cells in regards to hormone release, your body in terms of hunger or sleep, and it applies to everything. And lack of input or lack of significant input one way or another will soften you and make you less capable, because the body will re-equalize the 0 point for that thing to a lower level. So continually resetting what the 0 point is for that one thing means that you are able to then withstand or cope with all of the ranges of input, either way of that curve.
Again, it's the training, the mind gym, the soul gym. I think a big thing to emphasize here, which is, I think, where people get a bit hung up on Stoicism and think that it's like in saying it's wonderful to have nothing. He's saying it's not that you should love doing or being in this state of poverty, but that it's a reset and it's a healthy way to keep ourselves grounded and aware of the positives that we have in our lives. I mean, I guess it can also spiral into more negative stuff if you start seeing the poverty of other people and think that you don't deserve any pleasure yourself and start telling everyone else that they're terrible, which is virtue signaling, and it's tipping into the extreme.
Yeah, that's just weird to me. I think that's another form of mental illness. Like,
there's so many things we can label mental illness as we batter through
just
this.
Dump it. Well, it's what should be a useful mental framework turned into a closed loop that no longer serves you or anyone else. That's what I classify as mental illness personally, like to various degrees. Obviously, there's ones that are worse than others, but when you stop, I don't know, like hoarding, useful to keep some stuff in case you need it. Doing it too much to a point where it's ridiculous, no longer useful.
Or like the comedian that we saw at the Edinburgh Festival, Sean Patton, where in the morning he's got this OCD ritual. He has to touch his asshole like 3 times.
No, throughout the day, he has to touch his asshole 3 times. So, exactly 3 times. Like,
or the universe ends. So he's like,
no,
you're
that
welcome.
one was to prevent the assassination of the president.
Okay, when it was Obama.
In general.
Oh.
And which is why the funny joke was that he's conflicted now. Should he leave it or not?
And it's all in his hands or in his ass. But again, like pretty harmless unless we believe in the presidential element of it. But if he touched it all the time, he'd have a sore asshole.
Yeah, if you had to ramp it up to 200 times per day.
Like, prod, you got to keep these things under control, people.
But also that repetitive behavior of... It is another broken system. The idea that it's a system designed to find out patterns of things that you do that might have a positive effect on your life. And it's broken, and it has misidentified touching his asshole with the president not dying.
Quite a dramatic leap.
Yes, that is a pretty severe break in the usefulness of that particular mental framework.
I wonder if he really wants to do comedy, or if that's also preventing some kind of disaster.
Like, I have to do this.
I hate it. I just want to eat ice cream. Leave me alone.
We should have him on. It was fun when he was on Probably Offensive, one of our, I guess, like I call it sister podcast. It's not really, but we helped them set up. It was quite fun. I think they've since parted ways, but yeah, he's a great comedian, and he was a great guest there. So we should try to invite him on.
We should. Cool guy. I'm sure he's listening. We're talking about your asshole, Sean. Come on the show. Apparently this...
Does your ears burn when you feel like, is his asshole burning because you're talking about...
Where does it hurt? Show me on the doll. Apparently this kind of practice of going with little, even Epicurus, the apparent pleasure teacher, rival school of thought in philosophy, although Seneca throughout his letters keeps citing him for what he agrees with, Epicurus did this too and said that it was positive, which was a surprise.
Coming from Epicurus, is it like the drug user that, waits until the very last moment so the high can be so much sweeter?
Maybe.
Intentionally starving himself so that when he does feast.
It's like one of the benefits of like recording the podcast that I can't vape. during it because it's so annoying, the noise. So
the nicotine tastes so much sweeter.
The hit is going to be awesome when we finish. So that's why I want to extend the episode a little more for the big end. So the next quote I highlighted was, this can be accomplished only by persuading yourself that you can live happily without it as well as with it, and by regarding riches always as likely to elude you. Now, I agree with the first part in terms of knowing, okay, I am able to live happily without X. I may be happier with X, but I'm okay without X. I think that's a healthier, not need-based relationship. But regarding riches always as likely to elude you, I think it's maybe a little overly negative. I don't think it helps to assume that you'll never become financially secure in some way, but I guess it does help not to expect it.
I mean, I guess in their time, someone becoming rich was very unlikely if they weren't so already. You know, less opportunity to invent a crazy app or something like that. You know, you whatever trade you were in, you know, that's how much money you made per year.
I guess that's so, yeah.
The merchant class or the entrepreneur class would have been much smaller and less likely to find an idea that hadn't been done before. Actually, there probably was more ideas to find that hadn't been done before, but within the framework of what was possible or permissible within society, there probably was a little bit more of a restriction there.
What do you think of the mechanism, though, of this thought process? Is it better to expect or like have a sense that riches are going to come to you?
Depends if you want to be successful or happy.
Oh dear, we have to split them.
Well, if you assume that there's more than a good enough possibility based on the infinite multiverse and your own gumption and willingness to do whatever it takes to reach the limits of what's humanly possible, you're way more likely to get there, but you're way more likely to be constantly unhappy about where you're at. Now, that's what you have to work on. Vice versa, if you just say, well, I'm probably never going to get anywhere, and then you just accept it in your heart, you're probably going to be happier, but you're way less likely to succeed.
Okay, laying it out. You're on fire today. Burning everyone's dreams down. So the end of this letter is another Easter egg from Epicurus about anger. And the quotation is, ungoverned anger begets madness. Madness. This can come, Seneca says, from love or from hate. It can be all sorts of things that can end up getting out of control in terms of madness. So, an anger. He says, similarly with fire, it does not matter how great is the flame, but what it falls upon. For solid timbers have repelled a very great fire. Conversely, dry and easily inflammable stuff nourishes the slightest spark into a conflagration. So it is with anger, my dear Lucilius. The outcome of a mighty anger is madness, and hence anger should be avoided. Not merely that we may escape excess, but that we may have a healthy mind.
I feel ambivalent towards this.
Strongly ambivalent?
Yes, because there was several periods of time where I thought that I completely conquered anger and it was gone. But not even conquered, that I killed it, that I couldn't even access it if I wanted it to. I couldn't find it within myself to get angry. I would just be disappointed and sad when something went badly and just get over it. But at the same time, it missed a certain fire that sometimes drives to action. And I'm worried that if you sort of strive to control and eliminate anger within you because you think it's a good idea, because, you know, anger can be very destructive, you might do it in such a way that you sort of blunt or mute yourself emotionally, which is what I felt that I did. There's got to be a way to, A, limit and not be dominated by it, but also kind of cultivate just a general little flame inside you that drives you to do things, which can be sometimes moved to anger, because passion can be easily moved one way or another. But that, you know, otherwise you might turn into too cold a logical robot, which is not good for a human being, I don't think. I certainly felt less good than when I have some access to some of that.
I see what you're saying, and I think I agree, though maybe I'd may express some of it differently. That I think the quote from Epicurus is ungoverned anger begets madness, and governing is kind of an ambiguous word, I suppose. That I think that how the passion, the emotion of anger is expressed is the important thing to be able to have at least some sort of practice of control over. It's not that you don't acknowledge and feel it, but you don't have to punch someone in the face. You know, you can...
Right.
I always feel perhaps most disappointed in myself if anger flashes out and I yell something or throw something, and then I look at myself and go, I think that I think I am just lost control. And I don't mean like, oh, he lost control. I mean like that my meat vehicle was taken over by something else. And that's actually quite scary, to just kind of revert to this very primal kind of autopilot mode.
I think maybe reframe the hierarchy of what part of your mind is in control. So your consciousness or ego or whatever, however you identify your true self, the thing that cannot be stripped away from you. When it is, you don't exist. That bit is the king or the emperor. Anger, thoughtfulness, kindness, all those things are counselors or tools at your disposal, giving you advice.
Well, this is like Inside Out, right? Yeah. The Pixar movie.
So, you know, if anger is going, burn them all, you can go, no.
Yeah, so I don't want that ruling body to be dethroned by
rather
anger.
Than you being the counselor to anger who's in charge, you know?
I don't want to become the anger counselor. Yeah, I think how it comes out is important from a kind of meditation or Buddhist perspective, which I also really like. It's okay to accept, and you actually can make anger worse if you don't accept that you're feeling it. Like it can come up and you're like, oh, I'm really angry. Okay, that's fine. It's fine to feel angry. But again, I don't have to set fire to the person who's angered me, or, you know, keep like... It seems to have been a habit in my life, thankfully not recently, to like punch walls. Like I broke my hand on my 21st birthday party in a rage after someone had attacked me in a club. Like nothing too serious, but they like tried to throttle me from behind and then fucked off. And then people stopped me going after this guy, which was good because I was horrendously drunk, 21st birthday party. And to kind of just get the rage out of my system, I punched a building and the building didn't move.
Funny that.
And I broke my hand.
Yep,
and,
not good.
You know, that was one way to express the anger, but, you know, it could also... It's harder when you're drunk, you know, the excess on that. It could also have been fine just to go, well, that happened. I can't change the fact it happened. # Stoicism. I don't have to feel good about the fact that it happened.
Would you have punched the wall if no one was there to watch you?
It's an interesting question. I have punched walls in front of people, if that helps.
Have you ever had that type of physical display of anger? How frequently has it happened when you've been angry without presence of other people?
More often when there's been no other people.
Oh, you'd like throw things around and like kick things when there's nobody there?
Yeah, it's kind of a self-destructive thing, I would say.
That's good in a way.
Yeah.
Because it's not a tool to try and prevent the loneliness of the emotion being something that only you're feeling and trying to share with others, which is another pathological problem.
Am I avoiding this one?
But yeah, you're avoiding that particular aspect of it. If it's something you do anyway, it's still stupid.
Oh yeah.
But it's not. I think it's probably easier to work on.
I think it's a kind of amped up version, and it's very, very rarely. I mean, it's nothing that's happened recently to that extent. I think that the lower version, which is kind of fine, is if you just need to let something out and you just like yell a sound or something, or maybe you got a book in your hand and you just throw it on the ground, and it's kind of a hissy fit, but in a way, if it just releases the tension inside you, there's no real harm done.
Yeah, no, it's as long as it's done effectively. Or you go to the punching bag at the gym or something.
Much better.
Yeah.
To go and do that and get like if I wasn't still plagued by injury, I would go for a run because I know I would feel better after that. It's like the energy of anger can be transmuted into something else which is not destructive.
Cool.
Because I'm an alchemist. There's one last thing I wanted to say to round this bit up, which is another kind of Buddhist perspective. That anger comes from suffering. That when you are angry, it's because you are suffering in some way. You're very unhappy about it. And a good angle then is that if you see someone who is angry and they're coming at you, don't meet it with anger, but recognize that the other person is suffering. Think, well, how would I be feeling if I were them? I'd be in a terrible state. Poor them. Even if they're acting like a total dick, they're actually in pain, and that's where the anger comes from.
When a friend or a loved one feels anger, I generally feel compassion rather than defensiveness. When someone I hate or an enemy feels anger, I do feel pity.
I mean, that's a bit better than like dancing on them, but but that things often go wrong, I think, if we follow them into their territory, the angry person, and then both people are angry, and then both people are suffering, instead of trying to lower the emotional volume of the moment by, it's like if they're throwing their rocks, you're kind of the still pool, and it just, has some ripples, but it just sinks under the surface, and gradually, like a toddler, really, if you're just like, it's okay, they can gradually calm down. Though I don't intend to spend any prolonged time with toddlers. Not after the restraining order, anyway.
You're not allowed.
Not allowed. I've been told. Can't even go walking near public parks. On which bombshell? I think that's it's quite an interesting, fairly easily digested in principle letter.
Yeah, I think so. And I think we gave it a good modern frame for people listening.
#modern Stoic. #learning how to human. See, I've been doing Instagram. I know how the kids are communicating these days.
So if you've enjoyed this, maybe tweet out a quote and #modern Stoic out on Twitter or Instagram or something like that. Let us know that you've listened, which parts you liked or didn't like.
Yeah. At vinthed.pod on Instagram, Twitter @vinthd. Kind of ignoring Twitter a bit at the moment. I think everyone left Twitter and went to Instagram.
A little bit, yeah.
Didn't realize you can sort of actually message people on Instagram and stuff. I was totally oblivious.
Yeah, it's becoming the new main social network, really, in some ways.
So check that out.
I miss Twitter. I miss when Twitter was good.
Well, you can't change that.
No, I have to accept it.
Be stoic about it. You got to move forwards. So thanks everyone for listening to the show, and do go check out our socials, because as I've mentioned on a different episode that I forget where, apparently I'm about to become something like a porn star, which I'm excited about. It's photography. I
wonder how many of our listeners are thrilled by that idea.
And how many are disgusted. If you're disgusted, I don't need to hear from you. But yeah, our social feed might get a bit weird sometime soon. Probably won't put it on the podcast feed, but
maybe not.
Never know.
Tag the podcast.
It'll be like tag the podcast, have #modern Stoic over some erotic.
Nice.
Anyway, next week we haven't decided on the letter yet, but I'm enjoying making these. Yeah,
it's great fun, and we're looking really amazing and handsome on our YouTube channels. So come check us out. If you're only listening, maybe check out the YouTube channel and subscribe to that as well.
Yes, and until we talk to you next time,
please be silly, be kind, and be weird.